Hello. I think it is ready. Thank you, Professor Papandreou, for the very interesting speech. I think this speech concluded our session of speeches, of talks, and we should now go to the panel discussion. I think now I can be heard. Okay, sorry, excuse me. So we will have the question and answer session now. We have been using the Slido application, so we already have a few questions. We will go with a couple of these questions, and then you will ask also questions in the traditional way. You will manually, yes, you will raise your hand. So I would like to address the first question that has the most votes as well. So most people want to have a reply to this question. What are the top barriers you have faced in the process of trying to integrate sustainability initiatives in the society? And this question is not addressed particularly to someone, but I would like anyone from the panel who could give a reply to that. Professor Papandreou, please.
Is it on? Yeah, it's on. Okay, well, to start with, I think it has to do with the nature of the climate change problem, which up to recently, it's been a problem that the future, all the damage comes in the future, whereas the costs of taking action are up front. And it's also been a problem that's complex to communicate, to get people to understand the immediacy, of course, precisely because it's the future, the issue of immediacy is a direct issue, the complex nature of it, the fact that people don't really understand how they can engage in a meaningful way in taking action, and the fact, of course, that it requires such a broad set of changes across the entire economy, and ultimately the political costs. In other words, what politician will decide to take action that may seem to take us out of our comfort zone for a small period of time in order to bring about the changes. And we saw this with Macron precisely, what we talked about earlier. So I think those are the major challenges, and I think the way to address it, besides awareness of what we're doing here today, is finding ways to convince those who are the most vulnerable to the costs of taking action that they will gain. So we need to start finding coalitions of people who will believe that if we take action, they're not going to be worse off. Okay, some people are going to be, oil companies might be worse off, but we need to convince certainly the broader public that they have much to gain.
I mean, I fully agree with Andreas. Nowadays, we can safely say that renewables are at least as cheap or as costly as fossil fuels. These are information that are not being transmitted to the general public. Why? The scientists know, the economists know, but the way information is transmitted is difficult exactly because people are not engaged in this problem. To engage people, you need to make them aware of their power to make a change. And it seems like they feel that the problem is much bigger than what their power can affect. But for me, it's not the lack of the potential of education or disseminating information that is creating the biggest obstacles. The biggest obstacles, especially in this country, but also in Europe and other countries, is the structure of the institutions. The institutional capacity of the country is not enough in order to take these challenge and make it an opportunity. This is an opportunity for Greece. Greece is very wealthy in terms of renewables, is very wealthy in terms of scientific capacity and human labor force to implement all this. And we are not taking this to the people. The people should understand that this is their chance and that this is a real opportunity for them. And I'm sure Nikos will have a lot to say about how you motivate people.
It's not easy. Pretending that it's easy is going to be a lie. I mean, we've been trying to engage people through the ice is melting in the Antarctic. So what? It's far away. That's what you get, especially people living in the Greek reality nowadays, not 20 years back. But when we're talking about moving towards energy efficiency, efficient buildings that will cut your energy bill and will also reduce CO2 emissions, and that will create jobs, that's it. And it makes sense. That starts, and you see there that the appetite of the audience, of the public, is much higher than the appetite of the politicians to move to that. We're talking about, for instance, the program Exconomo. As Minister said, we need one per month. We've been having one per year. We need to change something like a few millions of buildings, not 30,000 or 20,000 buildings, in order for that to make sense. To make sense in a sustainable way for the economy, create new jobs, reduce CO2 emissions, decentralize everything, and then. If I may add one thing, because we've been focusing on the public element, on the engaging, the difficulty in engaging in such a complex issue. It's not the first time. We do have experience of engaging in a similarly, equally complex issue when we're meeting with ozone depletion, which is up in the stratosphere. Give me a break. Who knows what's happening out there? I mean, well, Manolis knows, but and Dimitri, but you know, the National Observatory. But we did it. We made it, and we're pretty successful after 30 years to get to see the first positive results. Compared to the ozone depletion, there we have a problem. We have a big elephant in the room, and that's a huge vested interests that are impacting directly policy making. There is no other business, like energy and oil business, that is so strongly tied to policy making, to governments.
But they are on a death row, because
yes,
there's no way they can sustain themselves more than 30 years.
Yeah, but
I mean, renewables are becoming much cheaper, so unless they change, they are going to lose the train, if I can use a Greek phrase. They are going to lose the first mover advantage.
Most of them did it already.
Yeah, and they're going to be out of business. And if they don't understand this, it's their loss. But we cannot let them delay the transition because our life is on the stake. And it would be important for people to become more engaged and powerful as soon as they understand that the floods and the forest fires that we are facing in this country are part of the extreme weather events that are connected with climate change. We need to make the link, and then I think the people will react and vote for the right people to be in the relevant ministry and in the other ministries and coordinate the transition.
Can I add something as well? Well, I think that we might be wise to look at it in a little bit different way. How about if we approach the ordinary, in quotes, citizen and say, look, wouldn't it be nice for you to have, as already mentioned, a lower electricity bill or a lower heating bill, and then make that facilitate ways of doing that. Climate change is a long-term process, and its effects are in the future. And that timeline is very important in how you go about doing that. Because if you tell somebody, look, how about if you put $1,000, 1,000 euros, or 3,000 euros to improve your house, the benefits of that will be seen over 4, 5, 6 years. The cost will be borne today. So the question is, how do we convince people that we shouldn't look at from day to day, but rather in a longer time frame, and then forget about climate change. Just tell them things like, how about improving your house to make your bills lower? How about improving your transportation, not because usually your car less, but make sure that the buses are much more efficient and clearly cheaper. I think that we should start looking at ways of indirectly putting climate actions into everyday, understandable, financially based arguments to the average person, so that he or she can see the benefits in a much more clear way, and underneath all the actions that we need to take to protect the climate would become a little bit more, maybe not obvious, but anyway better served. So what I'm saying is, yes, indeed, climate is something that a number of people here on the outside and are worried about, and have been doing that for years. Nikos Angelakis has been fighting, he has devoted a large portion of his life fighting for that. But then what you need is to find other ways, maybe a little bit more subtle ways, to make sure that something happens. That's one level. The other level, of course, is to see what happens at a much higher political level. For example, two parties have proposed in the latest change of the Constitution to have a specific reference to protecting the climate in the new version of the Greek Constitution. Now, that has gotten zero publicity. Okay, and I am not so sure, even I who have been looking at those kinds of things, I'm not so sure what happened in the latest vote that took place earlier this month. But indeed, what I'm saying is that that particular conundrum that both Andreas and Philip mentioned, that people are a little bit disengaged, need to be addressed in a more circuitous way, and that I think will be much more effective. Yes, indeed, at different fora, like today's, you need to be a little bit more sophisticated and produce the numbers and the estimates and the financial costs and the balance that Andreas mentioned already on how you go about doing it. By the way, speaking of Brexit, Greek presidency in 1994, one vote was missing to pass a carbon tax in the European Union. Guess who was that vote that was not voting for it? The UK. Okay. So maybe there might be.
UK has a tradition.
There might be ancillary benefits to Brexit.
UK, the dirty man of Europe.
Yes.
This is how it was called.
But can I ask the audience something now? How many of you know how many of the parliamentary parties in our parliament have voted yes to the new fossil fuel investments? So you know it. So everybody has voted for the new. So, okay, I rest my case. Yes. They are. It's a party. Okay. So this shows that we are not going the right direction. We are not going the right direction, and people know it and do not react. There is something.
Now, yes. Professor Papandreou mentioned something about sustainability revolution. And I think that all that we are discussing is simply small steps that we can kind of twist and turn our way in order to finally achieve the destiny, which is the sustainability revolution. The question was, what is the biggest difficulty that we do find? And I think that this big difficulty is the same difficulty that all pre-revolutionary societies faced, and that is denialism. We pretend that we don't see the problem, or that we are too small to actually combat the problem. And the only solution to this, and this is going to sound bad, is revolution. And it is the sustainable revolution, this final step.
So we need the revolution. Sorry, when you say revolution, what do you mean?
Sustainable revolution, whatever you understand by that. We don't know it. If we knew it, we would be already doing it. revolution means a revolution of the mind, first of all. Whether that is facilitated by people on the streets, this is part of it.
If I may, we have the technologies.
And we have the resources. So it's a matter, I mean, the minister was right, it's a matter of political choice. The technology is there, the resources, the money is there. We need a major reallocation. This is a political decision. Unfortunately for us scientists, we've given all the facts, we've given all the cost-benefit analysis that we can do as economists. It's a political decision. Who affects politics? The people. And business are the people, and they are very important. And as soon, nowadays, the countries that achieved to revolutionize their transition to a sustainable path are countries which have strong businesses in renewables and related matters. So yes, businesses. We have to engage the businessmen in our country. And Andrea.
No, just because I had mentioned the revolution, I need to defend it now.
I'm fine with the revolution. Okay. I'm happy with it.
I mean, just in terms of historical revolutions, I mean, when, for instance, the automobile came in, there was huge reaction to it, and negative reaction by many, because it was creating accidents to the horses in the streets. It just happened to be such an attractive consumer good, and certain things came into place, including oil industry that wanted it, including Ford, who decided that he should focus on low-cost cars rather than the electric. The first cars were electric, but they were focusing on the high-end market and didn't even consider going for the low-end market. Ford came up with the idea we need to get a cheap car out, and so the convenience drove that revolution. Our problem now today is that we don't have something quite as attractive at the level of the consumer or producer to drive the revolution. We have, and that's where Greta comes in. The revolution has to be driven by our understanding of the consequences that we don't do it. And it means changes in our lives in all kinds of ways. So whether it means political activism, yes. Whether it means the academic community starts connecting with other communities and saying, we got to move, yes. Whether we move on innovation, think like what Dimitri said before, find ways for consumers to understand that changing their energy consumption or insulating their house will actually benefit them, and find the institutional means of getting that message to everyone. That's revolution, a change in our lifestyle.
Give powerful this ecosystem of innovative startups that come up with the ideas that are good ideas that can change things in everybody's life, and as a whole it can have a huge impact on our adaptation potential to climate change by also mitigation.
I want to mention something. It's very dense and very complex. I'll try to make it simple. Monday, there was a meeting of the Global Human Forum, an initiative which works for change that comes bottom up. Change will not come from the governments and the few. Change may come from the societies as a whole, which is a very exciting and very pragmatic and positive model of thought change. The next day, yesterday, we were talking about synergies between organizations that can align together to help the bottom-up creativity towards change. What I was thinking these 2 days and today is, if you're going to align the societies towards a direction, or if you want to align, to help align the organizations for synergies towards a direction, you need to create a common desire you have to make the people want something. My feeling is that the total environmental initiatives have been highly dominated by a mechanism of phobic messages that are trying to create anxiety, terror. If I don't do that, we will die. I mean, the big wave will come, our children will be unhappy. Phobic things. We are not using a positive desire to mobilize the many, many, many people that need to work together with a desire to consume less, with a desire for a cyclic economy, with a desire of not moving too far. So that's a feeling. I want to tell you a personal example. I'm about 70 now. I was dreaming for a déchevaux since I was 16. A déchevaux, a super déchevaux. I got the déchevaux 2 months ago. And I feel so happy. Why do I feel so happy? Because I'm driving with my 40 kilometers in a 200 kilos coverage on wheels. And everybody's passing by me with 2,000 kilos of vehicles and 200 horsepower. And I'm there on my own driving with 2 horsepower in a 200 kilos car. And that is why I'm trying to tell to my grandchildren, listen, your dad is driving a 2-tons car with 2,000 horsepower. He takes you to Athens or to Spetses. Your granddad takes you in a 2 horsepower to Spetses. I'm telling this to them with happiness, because I feel that I'm more ethical than the others. I'm a better citizen now that I consume less. I'm a better grandfather because I teach my grandchildren that they don't need a big car. What I want to say is that if we focus our total effort to the basic universal values of loving nature, or behaving like nature, right? Then the environmental, climatic change protection, sustainability movement, which is essential, might become much, much, much stronger in a much, much, much cheaper manner, which is founded on the freedom of desire of the peoples.
I agree with the positive picture. I agree. And the way to move towards that is travel, travel, travel. Travel to Scandinavia. All the young students who travel come back and they reinvent themselves. The positive connotation, the positive thing is very important. But we have to also identify the urgency of the disaster, because they never, I mean, we are one group of people, I mean, from the natural science to the astrophysics to the social, to the economics, to the activists, that we have not been listened to. They do not take us seriously. That's why
That's the syndrome.
Can I add a thing in what you said? You mentioned something about the culture of fear. And about the culture of fear and the way that we are using things to scare the population towards submission onto climate change. Water levels are going to rise 7 meters. If that scares you, then do something about it. We're not saying that to scare anyone. The science is there. The climatic facts are there. No one is fear-mongering. We're simply stating the facts. If they are scary, our perceptions need to change.
Okay, with scare, I can be afraid and do something. But let me tell you, on our island, Spetses, our ecumenic patriarch came this summer, and they made the Symposium of Patmos, which is an environmental sustainability symposium of scientists, activists, and religion. It was the Vatican, the chief mufti, the chief Rabbi, the conclusion of the discussion of scientists, of economists, of projections, of technology was that if we put them all together with what the divine peoples, divine-driven people of the religion said, if we put them all together with a holistic theological love for nature, then the drive of the individual may become stronger and aligned in this direction.
If I may to play the role of peacemaker here on these two different things, in my view we need to draw on all human motivations, both an understanding and a fear, and those positive things that make us feel that we can engage, we can use our communal, our altruistic sentiments, our sentiment of doing good. We use both the bottom-up, absolutely critical, but we have to recognize that one of the greatest human inventions as well, even though many people don't like to say it, is the government. So we need to use that. That was a bottom-up process that brought that. So we use every tool we can, and the speed has passed. So we take that message aboard, we take the other message aboard.
And we give the...
Can I add a very short question?
Yes, and then someone from the audience will...
Minister Panos has left, but let me play his role for a minute. I know that most of you are not from Thessaloniki, but if you were, and I proposed a tax of 20 euros per kilogram of emissions to be able to drive economically toward a low emission society. Would you vote for me? No? Let me see your hands. You think those 6 hands out of 100 I would be voted in? No, but what I really want to say is that yes, indeed, intentions are good. We need to make sure that the intentions are not only good, but they're promulgated. But still, we also need to look at the other side of the question, which has to do with reality, which is both economic and political. And I think that it would be important to see whether indeed some of those suggestions that Andreas put up, which are actually a long time in the process, namely to make sure that the economic value of the environment, what's known from the economic point of view as external cost, and, is indeed taken into account, and the politicians realize that maybe that would be beneficial. Mind you, recent history says no. Okay? There was a referendum in the state of Washington, in the United States, saying, how about the tax and all the money will go back to you, to the citizens? The answer, the vote was negative. Sorry.
Hello. First of all, congratulations for this enlightening discussion. My name is Alexandros Karidis. I'm Secretary of Symposium, a newly set up organization trying to boost the circular economy transition, both in Greece and abroad. I'd like to raise a twofold short question, both to Professor Papandreou and Professor Koudouri. I totally agree that this sustainable revolution is mostly a state of mind, change in how we understand and think about things. Maybe in your point about mobility, finding a garage in order to charge our cars, our electric cars, wouldn't be a concern in a sharing economy where we just rent a car according to our daily needs through an app. So maybe this interrelation between sharing economy and sustainability is a thing of the future that we have to look into. And my question focuses on the investment side, which is really important. I know that you have worked a lot in your life on externalities, and we need to internalize these externalities in the investment decisions, both in how we take a decision to invest and also in how we evaluate the portfolio. You talked about these innovative startups, and valuation is the fundamental process in order both to invest in them and have an exit. So how regulators are, let's say, imposing the sustainable valuation in the market forces and how market is embracing sustainable development goals and ecological and social estimations for the investment decision making. Thank you.
Well, I think you answered yourself the problem of the garage. So certainly if we can find another mode that overcomes this, and that's the kind of innovation that's needed.
Sorry to interrupt, just to be honest, I stole the idea from Franz Timmermans, who is the Vice Chairman of the Commission, and he was making this remark a few days ago.
Well, we all steal ideas. Very few people originate ideas, so that's fine. As long as we steal the right ideas. Okay. And on the other issue, I think Yannis Tournaras mentioned things that the central bank can do in terms of highlighting the risks of stranded assets and how that could affect the ultimately internalizing costs of wrong-headed investments, and therefore having banks realign incentives to invest in more sustainable forms and there are a number of mechanisms of doing that, but he already mentioned one way of going on that.
And thank you very much, Mr. Karidis, for his question. As I said in my speech, it's quite important to know the effects on natural capital for each and every investment, and take that into account, positive and negative effects on natural capital when you allocate a budget for between different investments. Every country, every businessman faces the same problem. We have a given budget and we have to allocate investments between different projects. Each project has to be assessed according to its effects on financial, economic, environmental, and social impacts. And it is not me that is saying that. It is not just the academia. The European Commission, since 20 years ago, has a regulation for impact assessment, environmental impact assessment for each and every big investment. And in addition to that, there is a regulation, all these regulations are transposed into national law. This is the law of our country and other European countries. In addition to environmental impact assessment, you also need to submit, in order to invest, a cost-benefit analysis which identifies and monetizes all the impacts of your investment, financial, economic, environmental, social. So this is one way of making sure that you're not going to make any unsustainable decision. And at the small projects, business projects, large and even huge companies, again, there needs to be a regulation, and there is a regulation that identifies the impact on sustainability on all three layers of sustainability. So it's the law of the country, it should be implemented, and any positive externalities that are produced from an investment should be subsidized, whereas all negative externalities should be taxed. This is the basic way to do it. There are smooth and aggressive ways to do it, but this is the basics of the framework in which you have to make decisions.
Okay, I think we should end this session. We had more questions, and Slido, maybe some of you also had some more questions, but we don't have much more time for this session. We will move now downstairs to the main corridor for a coffee break, and then we have the workshops with the three different games, the gamifying session as we call it. So please serve yourselves coffee. Before you go, thank you all for attending this session. Yes, sorry, before